Hello and welcome to another reading. This one is, I think, day 9 now of my 10 days of Christmas, and holy shit, we're getting close. It's been a hell of a month. Uh, it's actually been a pretty crappy month for me personally, and I really hope that things are looking up for you. I know it can be tough this time of year for some people, and I'm reaching out. If you need someone to talk to, then feel free to send me an email. I'm always here. I'm always ready to listen. And believe me, I can do with the break from constantly typing on the old laptop. Today, as a special reading, I thought I'd do something a little bit different. I thought I'd give the first prison days, first sort of couple of days maybe, a bit of a go. But instead of just doing a straightforward reading, I'm going to add a little bit of, I guess, what you'd call narration over the top, giving my own thoughts maybe throughout the day, to give you just a little bit of a different viewpoint from maybe how you've read this book in the past and how I actually see it, having lived it and having walked through it. So, yeah, a little bit something different today. So it's not just a straightforward reading. I don't know if you are into audiobooks, but Todd Waits, my narrator, he does an absolutely amazing job reading the entire Prison Day series, and that's available on Audible right now. And I really, really, really recommend his performance because it's really top class. I love it, and I remember the first time I listened to him. I actually forgot that it was me that had written it. So it's yeah, Todd, if you're watching, mate, well done, awesome job. All right, so this is Prison Days, from a little bit different viewpoint than you might have been used to in the past. Prison Days, the June edition, book 1. Let's go. Friday, June 1st. It was a relief shift for me today. I was working in Yarra North, which is classified as a protection unit. It's probably the worst one in the prison. It houses 55 cells, some singles and some dual occupancy. Some of the prisoners that reside in here include pedophiles, yes they do, rapists, terrorists, informers, and those needing protection because they're too scared to be housed in a mainstream unit. And yeah, they do exist. Those ones are what we call the whingers. Absolutely incredible. Some of the demands they make, um, just mind blowing stuff. I'm working with Sam and Ricky today, both permanently assigned here, and absolutely amazing officers. One of the things that always amazes me when I work in this particular unit is just how clean it is. Most other units are trash. Literally, they smell, they're dirty, the fridges are filled with rotten leftovers, dirty washing is usually piled in the laundry area, bins are either close to or already overflowing, and it seems there's a permanent stench of sour sweat that hangs in the air like a bad toilet spray. Holy shit. I remember the first time I went into some of these units and oh my god, it stank. Absolutely stank. And the thing is, it doesn't matter how many times you go back in during subsequent shifts, the smell is the same. So it's not just a single source, it's just the unit. It's just the way it stinks. It's its own body odor in a way. Horrible, horrible. Anyway, but not in Yarra North. It's clean. It even smells clean, thanks to the efforts of a couple of long-termers. As an officer, it's definitely something you appreciate, and I'll vouch for that. As I said, both my fellow officers call this place home, and because it's their normal place of work, makes the day that much easier. A fourth officer, Anthony, is the shipping officer today. He will be in and out of the unit most of the day, his main duty to ship protection prisoners around the prison to where they're needed. This includes the medical wing for appointments. the admissions area for transport to court and other jails, or to the official functions area the crooks call Centrelink, named after a government department that handles welfare payments. It's 7:10 a.m. when I enter the unit. Unlock happens after morning muster is called correct by the control room. After putting my belongings away, I wait for another officer so we can go door to door, or trap to trap. The small latch that opens in the middle of each cell door. Operational standing orders requires us to carry a ligature knife in case we find what's known as a swinger, a prisoner that's hung himself during the night. And yeah, you do come across them. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you'll actually come across them shortly after they've done it. It's not uncommon for guys that are either trying to get a move out of a unit, or just trying to get some sort of attention. They'll pretend to hang themselves right before unlock or right before that morning trap muster. Sometimes they'll even wait to hear that you're coming along, and then they'll pretend to hang themselves. And it's sad. It's a sad reality that some people will go to that length, or those lengths, to just get some attention. For others, it's just a sign of desperation. They might be under threat. Someone's put a hit out on them. They owe debts, so it's one of the ways that they try and get out of the unit. Unfortunately, suicide is a reality in this place, so you have to be prepared for it at all times. Sam Howell, a veteran of 5 years and a personal friend of mine, enters the unit 5 minutes later, and after a few moments of pleasantries, we begin our muster. We count the entire bottom deck without incident, during which time our third officer arrives, Ricky Roberts, a fresh officer from the last intake. She's been in the unit since she finished her entry course, and I've heard good things about her. Confident, which counts for a lot. Sam and I continue to go trap to trap. All prisoners are friendly enough, some giving us a good morning as we peer in through the trap. It pays to return the pleasantries, regardless of their crime. The last thing we want is a shit bomb in the face because a crook took offence at you for not returning his good morning. And yes, shit bombs are very much a reality. Yes, they are. In all forms, in all containers. Sometimes they don't even need containers. They'll take a shit right in their hands and they'll just throw it at you. Other times they'll use shit just for paint and paint their unit, their cell. Use it for wallpaper. It's unbelievable. We continue up to the top deck and can already hear some sort of altercation behind door number 1. We pause for a moment to make sure we have the right cell and can hear a muffled argument, so drop the trap. The first thing that hits me is the smell. Fresh, pure shit. What's going on, I say, but I already know the issue. I can smell it. An unspoken rule in prison is, if you share your cell, you don't shit during lockdown. Watson, one of the 2 prisoners in 32, had broken the cardinal rule. He'd only been in the unit for 3 days, and I guess the rules hadn't been fully explained. The small cut to his right eye told me that school was definitely in session. Pompanelli, get away from him. Come to the door and put your hands through the trap. Fuck, boss, can you smell that shit? I fucking told him not to. Fucking stinks in here, he yelled, glaring at his cellmate. Robert, are you okay? I asked. He nodded his head, but was clearly scared. Sam, come to the trap and I'll get you out of there. Just put your hands through, man. Have to cuff you, I said, holding the bracelets up. He nodded, stepping towards the door. Cracking a cell before count correct wasn't allowed without a supervisor present, and as the crooks had been fighting, I looked at my offsider, who now called a code Foxtrot. Prisoner on prisoner fight. Code Foxtrot, Yarra North. Prisoner contained. Adding the Adding the prisoner's contained part saves the mad dash of officers racing to the unit to render assistance, and is something fellow officers and supervisors appreciate. Pompanelli complies with my instructions and puts his hands through the trap. Given the stink in the cell, fresh air would be his first priority. I've been in a cell where someone's just taken a dump, and I can attest to how bad it is. Very, very, very little airflow, and when somebody tells you that your nose or your smell only goes into shock for just 15 seconds, it's crap. When you go into one of these cells and someone's just taking a dump, that stink will hang around for an hour. It is putrid, and you can't breathe. Every breath you take is shit going into your lungs, and yeah, it's nasty. Very, very nasty. Where was I? Given the stink in the cell, fresh air would be his first priority. I cuff him and ask him to remain where he is. 30 seconds later, officers begin to come through the door, followed by the duty supervisor. I begin filling the soup in, and he motions for the cell door to be cracked. Pompanelli exits the cell, and we walk him to the end of the top-tier corridor. The soup enters the cell and talks to Watson. He appears okay, but the cut above his eye looks nasty, and we wait for the medical staff to arrive. When they do, they assess him and ask us to escort the prisoner to the medical wing. We'd find out later that Watson sustained a fractured eye socket, concussion, and a fractured jaw. It wasn't just a one-punch incident, it turns out. Pompanelli's moved to one of 4 management units called Murray. It's actually Murray North. He complies with all instructions, and the move is complete within 10 minutes. He's a long-termer in for incest and rape, and to him, the move to Murray unit only means he gets to enjoy a single cell. He's already serving a 15-year sentence, so having an assault charge added, where the most he will probably receive is 6 months concurrently, isn't going to affect him too much. If anything, he has a win by the move to the new unit. And you know what? Some guys will take a swing at another crook just to get into Murray North. It's disgusting. It is absolutely disgusting. It is one of the biggest farces, that unit. You know, when they talk about isolation or solitary confinement, it's not what it used to be. You know, now it's a holiday camp. It really is a holiday camp. You know, one of the biggest things that crooks crave in prison is a single cell. There's a single outer where they can take a shit whenever they want, when they can toss off whenever they want, you know, without someone else in that cell with them. It's hours and hours and hours of privacy, and for a lot of them, that's what they crave. It's not unusual for crooks to hide in their cells, to, you know, get cardboard and shove it against the window so it blocks out all the sunlight. You know, they close the door, they turn the television off, and it's dark. It's isolation. They get left alone for 23 hours a day in Murray, and it's what a lot of them want, and they'll do anything to get in there. So whereas it used to be a deterrence to go into that unit, it's not anymore. People request it. I remember being at admissions, and it wasn't unusual for someone to request to go there. You know, the most they'd miss out on is just a bit of their personal items. That's about it. Everything else, TV, kettle, you know, a single cell, it's everything they want. So it's definitely a different kettle of fish these days. All right. We continue our count once the soup is left, and control finally calls count correct at 8:05, some 25 minutes late. Due to prison rules, a late unlock means a late lock-up tonight. We proceed to unlock the unit, key in door style, and return to the officers' station. Now, if you're picturing a cosy officer station behind bulletproof glass, safely segregated from the unit population, then I have some grim news. The officers' stations in this prison are just circular desks on a raised platform with a gap on one side for access. If a prisoner wanted to enter the station, they could literally just walk in. There isn't even a little gate to close the station. In some units, that is. Some do have them, but they don't stop anybody. You're susceptible to assault, shit bombs, spitting, and hot watering. The second floor tier is close enough that if a prisoner wanted to piss on an officer, he wouldn't have to strain too hard. For a maximum security prison, it has zero protection for the officers, and that's something I like to highlight to anybody thinking of going into jails. Even with a lot of the ones that I see on television, it still takes someone to walk through the crowd. You will still have an officer who needs to walk through a unit with crooks, and if you want to be a dick, they will get you. They will get you one way or another. And something I say throughout this series, and something I used to say to a lot of the guys, something that was told to me very, very early on in my career, was they decide if you go home. They really do. They decide. It's a scary, scary prospect. The prisoners begin to exit their cells, voices now rising, a hive of activity around the toasters. 10 minutes later, the medical trolley arrives for morning medications. I put out the call over the unit intercom. Yarra North, first call for morning meds. A line begins to form out the front door of the med window, the nurse preparing for the onslaught. One at a time, they front the little window with their ID cards. Some are polite to the nurse, some are not. Some demand minor pain relief on top of their normal meds, and more often than not, are granted their request. Each prisoner takes their medication, swallows it with a cup of water, then presents their open mouth to an officer for inspection. Diverting medication is a very common problem, and officers need to be vigilant when performing this role. Standovers for medication are a daily occurrence in almost every unit. The pills can be traded for drugs, sexual favours, or anything of value. Today, the morning med run goes without a hitch. I sit at the computer and finish my report for the supervisor about the code Foxtrot from that morning. I also check my emails and note that we have 2 prisoners that are departing the prison for an alternative one. Transfers are very common and happen almost daily. There is also 1 internal transfer. The required prisoners are buzzed up and informed of their moves. All but 1 seems okay with it and walks back to their cell to pack their gear up. Only 1 grumbles and puts up a little resistance, but he too complies after a minute or so. Keeping your cool and remaining calm are much better options than demanding, confronting, and getting upset. It can mean the difference between a good outcome and an assault on a staff member. Officers only have their mouth and ears to rely on, and they must learn quickly how to utilise them. And that is so true. That is so true. I think every day, every single day of my career, I would have a situation come up where it was this that got me out of trouble. We didn't carry any weapons. There were no weapons, not even a baton. The only thing you had by your side was a radio. That's it. And unless you could, stick the aerial into their eyeballs, your mouth was all you had. That's all you had to talk your way out of stuff. Sometimes it didn't work. Sometimes that wasn't enough, and that's when a code got called very quickly. But very volatile place. The morning passes without incident. Before you know it, the announcement comes over the speakers that it's 10 minutes until lunchtime muster. We wait another 5 minutes and then announce for the unit to stand by their cells for count. Prisoners make their way back to their cell doors and quietly wait. It is in their best interest to remain quiet, as lunch is served immediately after control calls the count correct. 1 officer grabs the unit muster sheet and it begins to walk from cell to cell. The other 2 officers stand in the middle of the unit and begin counting to themselves. It is one of the things you do not want to get wrong. For one thing, if your numbers don't match the other 2 officers, then you have to recall the prisoners to their cells a second time. The other reason is if count is called incorrect and your unit was the cause, the rest of the prison has a way of finding out, and they certainly will let you know about it. Plus, to make it really interesting, you have the added benefit of the report to write as well. And if you screw up the lockdown muster, you've got to stay down after work, and that's a pain in the ass. Excuse me. The unit is silent as we prepare ourselves to count the numbers. Ricky volunteers to take the muster board around. Female officers are common and a very good asset. They are prone to shutting down incidents quickly and firmly. We have quite a number at this prison, some young, some old, but all valued and very, very, very true. I'd rather have a good female officer on my team any day. It's kind of weird, but the bigger someone is, the more the crooks want to challenge them. It's like a challenge to some of them. Whereas when the ladies come through, they just takes a little bit of talking to them, and they sort of know how to get things done. It's unbelievable. As Ricky begins her rounds, one prisoner makes a remark, and his cellmate snickers as she passes them. I clear my throat, make eye contact with them, and they look away, still grinning. Disrupting a muster can carry consequences. Penalties can hurt, such as the loss of a TV for a night or two, or a week, depending on the severity. Ricky finishes a count, looks at us, and we give her the nod. Break off, she says sternly. We'll leave her be as she adds up her numbers. I show my piece of paper to Sam, and thankfully our numbers match. A minute or two later, Ricky approaches me and quietly whispers, 54? I nod in agreement. Control calls for muster numbers, and we call ours in. 20 minutes later, count is called correct and the afternoon begins. It actually reminds me, when you're doing muster, hang on one second, I just got to close the door. Sorry. Yeah, it's funny, but when you're doing muster, meals are normally served straight after muster. So what you have is it's like watching little kids when you say, okay, clean your room and I'll give you this, and you see them rushing off and cleaning their room as fast as they can so they can have their lolly or the toy that you got them. It's a little bit like that. It's like 5 minutes before mealtime and everybody does exactly what you ask. Any other time they don't give a shit, but comes up, when it comes to their meals, they don't like getting messed around with their food. All right. Shortly after 2 p.m, there's a call over the radio. Code Mike, Tambo. Our fourth officer, who's sitting in one of the offices reading a newspaper, decides to attend and lend a hand. He rushes out the door. We find out later that it was a chest complaint and the crook was taken to the medical unit. The afternoon medical run enters the unit at 4:30 and Ricky puts the call out. Yarra North, first call for afternoon medication. The prisoners begin to line up and I decide to stand in the cubicle and check mouths. It was going so well until an old crook, a small Italian with a fiery temper, gets to the window. He's forgotten his ID card, and when the nurse asks for it, begins yelling at her. You fucking know who I am, bitch. Just give me my fucking pills. He looks at me, hoping for some support. Come on, boss. She knows me. You can tell her. I see one of my offsiders begin to stand at the officer's station, ready to come to my aid if needed. You know the rules, Bruno. No ID card, no pills. You've been here long enough. He bangs on the window of the nurse's medical cubicle, and she looks startled. Another crook, a big lad of about 6'3", murmurs under his breath. Bruno, fuck off, mate. You're holding up the line. And just like lunch, you mess with a crook's medication, there's issues. A couple of other prisoners also begin to mutter, and Bruno begins to walk away. Fuck the lot of ya, he whispers, as he walks back to his cell. There are two things that you never want to get in the way of when it comes to prisoners, their pills and their meals. They don't want to be standing there any longer than they need to. The rest of the medication round went without incident, and we completed the 5 o'clock muster soon after. Once the count was called correct, I buzzed Bruno up to the officer station. I couldn't let the verbal abuse of the nurse go, and he would know that too. He approached, and I asked him how he was. "Everything okay?" He shrugged and held his palms up, gesturing that he was so-so. "The nurse didn't deserve that, Bruno. You know better. You also know the rules, and abusing a nurse isn't on." "I know, boss. I just forgot my card. And she has seen me every day for how long now? I just got fucking frustrated. It's my grandkid's birthday today. I'll apologise when I see her next. I'm sorry, boss." "I understand you're sorry, but you know I can't let this go. I'll have a chat to the soup when he's in and see what he wants to do. Just don't take it out on the nurse, mate. It's not her fault. She has rules she needs to follow as well." "I understand, boss. I'm sorry." He retreats to his cell, and a couple of the other crooks mutter profanities as he walks past. It's a small thing and doesn't go much further. The soup agrees that it can be handled in-house, and Bruno loses his TV for a night. He surrenders it voluntarily, and the situation is closed. It was a good result for everyone. Just before dinner, we receive a phone call that a new transfer is waiting for us in the admissions building. Our fourth officer is currently out, so I volunteer to go and get them. As I enter the building, there's a loud banging coming from one of the many cells. Excuse me. The echoes boom through the corridors as a prisoner is kicking the shit out of the thick metallic door of his holding cell. I go and see the officer in charge, and am told my prisoner is the one kicking the door. I open the trap window and see it's a returned regular, Jamison. He sees me and begins grinning. "Hi, boss," he smirks. "Giving the guys here a hard time, Stephen?" I ask. "Just letting them know I'm still here, boss." "I doubt they can forget with your communication skills." The last time Stephen Jamison was in Yarra North, he was caught providing the unit with substantial oral satisfaction in return for medication. He's a regular, often busted for drugs and small-time stuff. His favourite pastime is trading sexual favours for drugs. I knew that having him back in the unit would not make things easier. I prepare to take him back to the unit. In our prison, there's an area right outside the admissions building that every prisoner walks through when heading from one particular unit to another area. It's called the Quadrangle and contains a total of 13 gates and doors. And to take a protection prisoner through, this area requires clearance. Some of the gates lead into compounds, while others into buildings. I radio the officer in charge of the area, and he tells me to stand by. I wait. Now, it's amazing, the Quadrangle. I was on duty in there quite a few times, and I tell you what, 13 gates and doors is you could have half a dozen different groups waiting for you, and they'll each call you on the radio, and you have to remember who's who comes in which order, who goes next, and then you've got to try and work out which lights to turn on, because there's lights that signify who can go and who can't go, and those lights, you have different switches with lights that go into different doors and different corridors, and it can get pretty nerve-wracking, especially when you've got half a dozen people calling you on the radio. It's not an easy job, that one. I radio the officer in charge of the area, and he tells me to stand by. I wait. I see one of my mates walk past and tip him a wave. He waves back, sees my escorted prisoner, and rolls his eyes, smiling. I fully understand his gesture. "Yarra North, make your move," the voice says over the radio. I open the door and wave Stephen through. As he enters the Quadrangle, the heckling from two of the gates begins. They're mainstream compounds, and the prisoners there despise protection crooks. "Hurry the fuck up, you rat," one yells. "Boneyard dog. Bring him in here, boss. We'll take care of him." "Come on, boss," the other joins in. Stephen looks at them and batters his eyelids. He grins and grabs his crotch. I shudder at the thought of what would happen if they got hold of him. There wouldn't be much left. The unit houses some very large Pacific Islander prisoners, and they're not known for their gentle dispositions. I hurry Stephen along and we enter the Yarra North compound. A couple of crooks are walking the perimeter path and start running over when they see my escort. "Hey dude, you're back," one says, and by his smile, I know what he's thinking. Stephen replies with a hug for one, then the other. A third gets a fist bump. "I'll come out after. Just need to get my shit sorted first. Wait here. Is Jerry still here?" he asks, Jerry being his previous cellmate. "Nah, he got shifted to PFPP last month." PFPP is a prison specifically designed for protection prisoners, located some 3 hours from the city. We make our way to the unit and enter through the airlock. Cheers immediately erupt as they see the new arrival. It's almost like a homecoming, and I wonder to myself where the deterrence is with prison life. Ricky greets Stephen and begins the induction interview. A bed pack is waiting for him, consisting of a blanket, a pillow, 2 sheets, plastic bowl, plate, and cup. He also receives a TV. He's assigned his cell, sharing with Anton, an illegal Spanish immigrant who's finishing his sentence for drug trafficking before his deportation. It's not a pairing I would have suggested, but there was a bed shortage, and cell choice was limited. Stephen takes his items and heads for his cell on the upper tier. One crook takes his bag for him, his hope for a reward clearly on his face. 4 other crooks follow, and they all pile into the cell to greet their new arrival. "Attention all stations, 10 minutes till lockup," the speaker barks across the prison. Prisoners hurriedly rush back and forth between cells, kitchen, hot water and microwave, desperate to tie off loose ends before their nighttime lockdown. There are hugs, fist bumps, and shouts of "catch you tomorrow, bro." Ricky again takes control of the muster board, and I lock the cells behind her, wishing each prisoner a good night. When I get to Stephen and Anton's cell, I see Anton not looking very impressed. It's an issue I know will need to be addressed tomorrow. 10 minutes later, the control room confirms the count is correct, and we head for the exit. Any day you can walk out of a prison under your own steam at the end of a shift is classed as a win. Today was a good day. And that's June 1st, and I hope you enjoyed that. A little bit of insight into some of the other, into some of my own thoughts as that first day sort of progressed. It feels weird reading back on it, and it takes me back. It takes me back to that day, and the emotions that you feel when you're walking a prisoner through the Quadrangle, and you have and not just those two shouting. You've got dozens of eyes on you as you're walking a protection prisoner through. Sometimes it's almost like a football crowd jeering and just throwing insults out as you walk past. It's funny, but that's prison. All right, well that completes day 9 of my 10 days of Christmas. I'll see you tomorrow with a very special final one, and I really hope you enjoyed this reading. All right, have a good night, have a good day, take care, and I'll talk soon.